Going on, guys? Hope everyone's having a great start to their week. Sorry if I've been a little inactive the last day or two. I'm actually preparing to go to Mexico City in the morning for a celebration for a couple of days with my girl. Now, I wanted to answer a couple questions around what are the next steps, okay? And I want to take a moment also to remind you of what decisions you need to be making here, because it's very easy to like think, okay, what's the next thing, what's the next thing, what's the next thing, what's the next thing, but really working with what you have at the moment sometimes is the next thing and what you should continue to focus on, right? So it's kind of like when someone comes to my gym and they're like, okay, I lost 10 pounds. Now, how do I speed this up? What do we change now? And a lot of times it's not changing anything is the answer. So I'm going to take a moment to remind you of the fundamentals and repeating those, right? And not rushing the process, because you can be aggressive sometimes when things are like, because there's some products and seasons when it's almost like anything you throw at the product works, and that's amazing. That's when you could scale up to freaking massive 20, 30, 40, $50,000 in a day. But most of the time it's going to be a building process, all right, and a repetition of the fundamentals. So let's go over a couple examples here, okay? And I made a little list that will be posted with this that is going to help you to see what to do, okay? So first things first, you are going to want to also launch more interest testing, right? So you started by doing first creative testing and then you move into interests. So now if I look at one of our accounts here, okay, this is just our last 7 days. So these are the remaining, these are the remaining interests, and pretty good numbers just for interest testing. And what you want to do, you want to find your best performers. So, for example, you sort by purchases, and then you would duplicate. And for this, I'm going to simply look for any kind of suggested interests, right, that I have not tested yet. So obviously, I probably want to duplicate once. I duplicate another 5, 10 times maybe. And what you want to do here is hit suggestions and just look at relevant interests that you haven't tested yet. Very simple. And you're just going to swap out the interests and then you run your test. So that is the first thing that you want to do. Okay. The next thing is when you're moving into, you also want to retest creatives, right? So this is going to be a little less frequent, so maybe every like 2 to 4 weeks you launch another small creative test, assuming the product is still performing well. All right. The next thing you want to do is you want to then launch your CBOs if you haven't already. So what would I do to launch my CBOs? I would select the top four, obviously top four. I would duplicate, new campaign, and then I would set this up for a campaign budget optimization. I don't know why it's not showing up on this ad account at the moment, right? The next thing is that you can also launch your worldwide if you haven't already. So what I would do for that, this is all US. So I would either do it within the same ad account. I would just duplicate and then obviously change all the targeting and labels over to worldwide instead of US, or I back out and just do it from the campaign level, make a duplication, and that's an option as well. Okay, so the third thing is going into worldwide and or moving into lookalikes. Okay, so for your lookalikes, how do you find your lookalikes? Let's pretend that this is going to be, this is my product store, right? I actually ran this product and scaled it like last April. Did pretty well in Mexico. So I'm going to use my little fancy dandy Facebook Pixel Helper Chrome extension plugin. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to expand the view content, grab my content ID, go back to my ads manager. I'm going to go to audiences. create the audience, custom audience, and I always start typically view content, then add the cart, then purchase. And I do this once each one of those events has hit 1,000 um, event fires, right? So like clearly this has had 253,000 content views. So that's obviously ready. This one has had 41,000, right? So this is just obviously months later, but you get the idea. So I'm going to go to website. I'd select the pixel for the store, 180 days. And then you select your event here for doing viewed content, refine by, content ID, put in your content ID, label it VC, and then product, whatever your product is. I like to give it a little bit of time so this actually has a number. So like maybe come back in 30 to 60 minutes. And then once it's ready, it says ready, but once it populates, then you go here, create lookalike. And this might be a little bit different depending on how new your ad account is. If you have a new ad account, you actually won't have this option. It'll just be the percentages. But like, for example, I do. So I'm going to punch in the country that I want to create this lookalike for. If you don't have this, you change it in your targeting. If you do have what you see here in your targeting, you just set it to worldwide for targeting because it'll actually optimize for the country you input here, right? So if you have it the other way, there's no country here, you just change the country in the targeting and you make your percentages here, right? So I like to make percentages based on anywhere from 2 to 4 million, I think is my sweet spot, right? You could test different things. That's just what I recommend you start with. Every country is going to be a little bit different. Like if I change over to Brazil, obviously I'm going to need to go a little bit bigger. So what I typically do for Brazil, I usually do 2 percentages at a time. If you're going worldwide, obviously you will want to have done worldwide targeting if you choose to do this. And I would create those, right? And then I would use those in my instead of in my interests. Instead of interests, I would actually come here to custom audiences and I would punch in my custom audiences there, right? And they would be listed here if I created those. Okay. So that's what you want to do. Obviously, you want to do worldwide targeting and testing prior with interests before you go ahead and make your lookalikes. If you've only been doing US at this point, you could just make your US lookalikes here. And last but not least, the other option you have is that you can duplicate and or increase your CBOs. We recommend all, but you wanted to go for a duplication method instead of a budget increase, they can work as well. You just have to test. I can't promise the result, right? So real simple, what I would do, I would just select, duplicate, and then I would change the budget for the new one if I wanted to do a duplication, or I would just do small budget increases in smaller increments, like maybe 10 to 20% every couple days or so, right? There's no wrong way to do it unless you're like cranking the budget up, but sometimes that shit works. So you never know. The only way really is to test. So this is the next step. This is exactly what I would recommend. There are bigger scaling strategies, but they're going to work best once you've executed on all of these and have had stability and consistency. All right. Hope that helps, guys. I know it will. Let me know if you have any questions.